you ever wondered what happens when a simple act of kindness changes everything? Today's story is about a lonely cowboy who offered an Apache woman a place to stay, but what she asked the very next morning shocked him in ways he could never have imagined. Stay tuned, because this tale will surprise you, move you, and maybe even inspire you. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe to Love in the Old West, hit that like button, and comment below. We want to hear what you would do if you were in John's shoes. Let's get started. The sun was sinking behind the jagged edges of the distant mesas, painting the sky in streaks of crimson and gold. Dust swirled across the dry plains, carried by the whispering wind that hinted at the coming night. John, a rugged cowboy with weathered hands and a heart grown weary from years of solitude, walked across the small clearing in front of his cabin. The creak of his worn boots on the wooden planks echoed through the silence, broken only by the occasional cry of a coyote in the distance. Life had been hard, and the loneliness harder still. As he secured the door and turned to stoke the dying fire, a shadow flickered at the edge of the clearing. At first, John thought it might be a wandering animal, perhaps a coyote or a stray dog looking for scraps. But then he noticed the movement, deliberate and cautious, a human shape against the dimming horizon. His instincts warned him to be careful. Strangers were rarely good news in these parts. Yet something in the figure's posture suggested desperation rather than threat. His hand hovered near the door handle, tension coiling in his chest. The figure drew closer, revealing a woman wrapped in a worn shawl, her bare feet scraping against the dirt. She trembled, not just from cold, but from exhaustion and fear. Her face was partially hidden, yet her eyes shone with a mixture of vulnerability and quiet strength. She stopped a few feet from the cabin, her gaze meeting John's with a silent plea that cut through the chill air. Without thinking, he opened the door wider, gesturing for her to enter, a decision that would ripple far beyond that small cabin that night. "Evening, ma'am," he said, his voice rough from disuse. "You look like you've been traveling far." The woman's lips quivered, but she managed a soft reply. "Please, I need shelter just for the night." Her voice was barely audible, yet it carried a weight that made him pause. John studied her carefully, noting the torn edges of her clothing, the dirt smudges on her face, and the raw exhaustion etched into her features. Despite his natural caution, something in her eyes told him she was telling the truth. He stepped aside, motioning her toward the warmth of the cabin. She moved with hesitant relief, settling near the fire while he added more wood to rekindle its glow. The warmth began to seep into her chilled body, and she wrapped the blanket he offered around her shoulders, shivering yet grateful. John prepared a simple meal, placing bread and stew before her. He watched in silence as she ate slowly, carefully, the flames reflecting in her eyes, each bite seemingly restoring a fragment of the strength she had lost along the journey to his doorstep. The night stretched on, punctuated by the crackle of fire and the distant howl of wolves. Outside, the wind cut across the plains, rattling the cabin walls, yet inside, a fragile peace had settled. John couldn't sleep. The presence of the woman stirred something in him that he hadn't felt in years. Loneliness had been his companion for so long, but now it felt different, softened by the quiet determination of someone who had walked through danger to reach this moment. He found himself stealing glances at her, wondering about the story she carried in those haunted eyes. By dawn, the first light of the sun filtered through the dusty window panes, illuminating the room with a pale, golden glow. The woman sat wrapped in the blanket, her posture straight despite the hardships of the night. John moved about his chores, trying to appear nonchalant, yet he felt the weight of unspoken tension. Something in the morning air hinted at change. She had survived the night, yes, but there was a question lingering between them, one that neither had voiced, yet both sensed was inevitable. Finally, as he poured water into a tin cup, she looked up at him, eyes steady and curious. "Are you still offering me a place to stay?" she asked, her voice calm yet deliberate. The question hit John unexpectedly. He had only intended to offer temporary shelter, a single night of kindness, yet her words revealed a hope he hadn't anticipated. For the first time in years, he felt the stirrings of choice, a decision that could break the chains of his long solitude. He swallowed hard, weighing the offer silently. I suppose I am," he said cautiously, glancing at her, unsure of how to navigate the uncharted territory between them. "If you need to stay a bit longer, you can, but there are rules here, and you'll need to respect them. I don't have much, but it's safe." The woman nodded, a small smile of relief crossing her lips. In that moment, John realized that what began as an act of compassion was becoming something deeper, something neither of them had expected. Over the following days, a subtle rhythm took shape in the cabin. John attended to the ranch, repairing fences, feeding animals, and keeping the cabin in order. The woman helped quietly, gathering firewood, tending to chores, and gradually becoming a presence he relied upon without fully acknowledging it. Words began to flow slowly between them, stories of survival, of loss, and of resilience. Her past, marked by hardship and bravery, unfolded in fragments, each tale weaving a connection between them that neither could ignore. The nights became a quiet sanctuary of shared warmth and unspoken understanding. By the fire, John watched her as she spoke softly of the Apache lands, of family lost, and of dangers she had narrowly escaped. There was pride in her voice, but also sorrow, a depth that resonated with his own loneliness. For the first time in years, John felt a flicker of something he thought he had lost, hope. The woman had arrived seeking shelter, yet she was offering him something far more profound. A chance at connection, a glimpse of life beyond the walls of solitude. Days passed, and the woman's presence became a steady rhythm in John's solitary life. The mornings were filled with chores, repairing fences, and tending to the animals, while the evenings were quiet, spent by the fire. Conversations began to deepen. She spoke of her people, their customs, and the struggles she had endured alone. John listened, fascinated by her resilience and courage. Each story revealed a strength that mirrored his own struggles and losses. Slowly, he realized he had begun to rely on her not just for help, but for companionship. For the warmth of another human presence in his otherwise empty life. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mesas, painting the sky in deep oranges and purples, the woman approached John with a question that made his heart skip a beat. "John, why did you help me when I had nothing to offer?" she asked, her eyes searching his for honesty. John paused, leaning on the workbench, unsure how to articulate the mixture of instinct and compassion that had led him to open his door. "I saw someone in need," he admitted finally, "and I knew what it felt like to be alone. I couldn't turn away." The woman's expression softened, a small smile breaking through her solemnity. "Not many would do that," she said quietly. John felt a strange warmth, realizing that their connection had grown far beyond a simple act of kindness. Nights turned into weeks, and the small cabin on the frontier became a place of shared laughter, quiet conversations, and mutual respect. John noticed how her presence filled the space with life, how her resilience inspired him, and how her quiet strength had begun to heal parts of him he hadn't known were broken. One stormy night, the wind howled against the cabin walls and rain battered the roof in heavy sheets. John was tending to a small leak when a sudden crack of thunder startled them both. The woman froze, fear evident in her eyes. Without hesitation, John moved closer, shielding her and reassuring her with a firm, steady voice. "It's all right," he said. "You're safe here." She clung to the blanket around her shoulders, her eyes reflecting gratitude and trust. In that moment, John realized their bond had evolved. It was no longer about shelter or survival. It was about protection, care, and the beginnings of something deeper. The next morning, after the storm passed and the sun shone brightly on the wet plains, the woman approached John again. Her voice was calm, but it carried a weight that made him take notice. "John, I want to stay," she said softly. "Not just for a night, but longer, if you'll have me." John's heart raced. He had anticipated a temporary arrangement, an act of compassion limited by circumstance, but now she was asking to be a permanent part of his life. The question shocked him, yet it stirred feelings he had long suppressed. John leaned against the doorframe, struggling to find the right words. I don't know," he admitted honestly. "I've been alone for so long, I'm not sure how to do this." The woman stepped closer, her eyes filled with quiet determination. "We'll figure it out together," she replied. "I'm not asking for perfection, I'm asking for a chance." Her words, simple yet powerful, pierced through the walls he had built around his heart. For the first time in years, John felt hope, a possibility of connection he thought he had lost forever. After a long pause, he finally nodded, a tentative smile forming. "All right," he said, "you can stay, we'll figure it out together." The relief in her eyes was immediate, her small smile lighting up the cabin like a sunrise. In that instant, the cabin, once a place of isolation and solitude, became a home, filled with warmth, laughter, and the beginnings of love. They moved forward cautiously, learning each other's rhythms, sharing chores, stories, and moments of quiet understanding. Each day, their bond grew stronger, grounded in trust, respect, and the shared experience of survival on the frontier. As weeks turned into months, their companionship deepened into something neither had expected. John began to notice the little things, her quiet determination, the way she tended to the animals, her laughter echoing across the plains, and the comforting presence she brought to his life. She, in turn, grew to rely on him, finding safety and acceptance in his steadfast nature. Together, they faced the challenges of frontier life, harsh weather, scarcity of resources, and isolation, not as individuals, but as partners, each supporting the other through hardship and uncertainty. One crisp morning, John stepped outside to check the fences, the wind carrying the scent of pine and dust across the plains. The woman followed, carrying a basket of supplies, her eyes bright with determination. They moved together silently, the unspoken rhythm of their companionship evident in every gesture. John realized that he no longer felt the emptiness of his previous solitude. Life, once a series of chores and quiet evenings, now held meaning, purpose, and the promise of shared moments. She had transformed his world simply by being in it. Months later, as the sun set behind the mesas, painting the sky in fiery hues, John and the woman sat by the fire, reflecting on the journey that had brought them together. "I never imagined life could be like this," John admitted quietly, his hand brushing against hers. She smiled, a mix of pride and affection in her eyes. "Neither did I," she replied, "but sometimes life surprises you in ways you never expect." In that moment, they both understood that what began as a simple act of compassion had blossomed into a partnership built on trust, respect, and the enduring human spirit. The cabin, once a symbol of isolation, had become a sanctuary of hope, love, and shared resilience. John often thought back to the night he first opened his door, realizing that small acts of kindness could ripple through time, changing lives in ways no one could predict. The woman, once a stranger seeking shelter, had become his companion, his friend, and the heartbeat of his world. Together, they faced the frontier with courage, laughter, and the certainty that whatever hardships lay ahead, they would face them side by side, stronger together than they could ever be apart. And so, the story of John and the Apache woman became one of quiet triumph, of two souls finding solace and strength in each other. The frontier remained harsh and unforgiving, but within the walls of that small cabin, warmth, hope, and love had taken root. Their journey reminded them, and anyone who heard their tale, that sometimes the most profound changes come not from grand gestures or heroic deeds, but from the courage to open one's heart and offer a hand to someone in need.